Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We got Seb returning, we got Jenny here for the first time, which I'm actually very excited about. And while I am excited, y'all should be too. Like the things, do the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails when we go live, which is of course Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And oh, look at that right off the bat. First thing, Grey Dad Gear, morning team. Good to see you, Dre. Good to see you on here. If you haven't yet, make sure you are signed up for the Reinforcement Loop. That is our weekly newsletter. That way you can stay in the loop with all things collective, as well as get a little bit of extra Shaun's thoughts, who we all need a little bit of extra Shaun thoughts. So let's get into some intros quickly here. Jenny, why don't you hit us up first? Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff, and we can carry on from there.
Sounds good. From LA originally, born and raised, lived all over Hawaii, Florida, everything in between. Founder of Paradocia. I know in English grammar it's probably pronounced paradoxia. But yeah, it was intended to be a collective, just like what you guys are doing. Here to release the suffering valve of humanity.
Man, I like it. Seb, how's the mountains treating you?
Things are good, man. Yeah, everything's really good. I'm about a couple of days away from heading off, so just the last minute preparation, the last minute wrap up for exfilling out of my family situation for a few weeks. So like just spending quality time and making it with full engagement until I head off. So that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm doing right now.
I like it. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you?
Yeah, things are good out here. Interesting on the Paradocia, because I was reading it as Paradoxia, as I'm sure a lot of people do. And the reason I might still like the title once you describe what it means, but the way I saw it was the paradox of things. I appreciate paradoxes in life. I appreciate paradoxes in conversation. And so, maybe your title is even more interesting than a paradox. I guess we'll find out.
We will find out for sure very quickly. Now, the topic that I picked today was living the brand. And I was thinking about this, and between the four of us, the thing that really kind of clicked in my head from looking at Jenny's Instagram and going through all of what you've been doing, as well as Seb and what he's been doing, and Shaun and I have been doing what we're doing. We have a brand. We have an idea of who we are, the external view of who we are. Let's put it that way. But we have to live that brand. We have to live it kind of every day. We have to be that person, and it can be challenging sometimes, as well as some people can brand themselves a certain way, but not live that brand. So I want to get your guys' first thoughts on just the idea of living the brand, the brand of you. Jenny, let's start with you. What do you got?
I'm assuming you called on me because I'm on the large screen, but
Yes,
my
indeed.
Wi-Fi, the sound just went out for a second.
Okay.
Are you in here?
I am.
For 11? Okay, because your name's
11 to 20. I thought they did.
Okay,
Thank you.
well,
Are you able to hear me?
yeah, good to go, Jenny. Go ahead.
Because I can't hear you guys.
No, you can't hear us at all?
Let me.
Okay, I'll come back to you then. Seb, why don't you jump on? And
Where's the
we'll
closed
come back
captioning when you need it?
Yeah, there's a few things that come to mind. For one, I don't self-impose having to be any way other than what I am, right? So it's not about we have to be the brand. The brand is often a byproduct and should be a byproduct of our authentic self and just us wanting to do something for the collective. And I think that's all we're mostly all of us are doing anyways. And so before the social media piece, for all of us, we were still doing the exact same thing for the exact same reason. And we added the social media piece as a proxy to perhaps have the ability to touch more people. I think when the problem in the authenticity realm starts hitting, it starts flowing, is when you're no longer capable of upkeeping whatever image it is that you're projecting of yourself or your actions, and you start contradicting yourself. And it's really interesting you bring this up, because I just had a conversation with a a lady that I know very well that's been teaching resilience mechanisms and all kinds of things for the last couple years to get a survivor of gang life, basically, mostly women, and she just went through an incredible ordeal and had like heart surgery and a variety of other things, and those things were all in the open format for her because she's kind of spoken about those things on their social media, so there's nothing hold back here. But the bottom line is, I literally 5 minutes ago sent her a message saying, good for you for being who you have been teaching, who you said you were for the last like however how many years, and teaching all these resiliency mechanisms, and for her to have the opportunity to demonstrate what it looks like real time, and for her to do that in an incredible manner was just cementing how truly uh, in line with her actions or words are, kind of thing. And so anyways, that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind is I'm not trying to live up to a brand. I'm just doing what I do. It just so happened that there is branding material in there as a reason as a result of how we're doing business and where we're doing it, and it kind of becomes a byproduct of that, but not the other way around, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking for sure. Jenny, how's your audio now? Can you hear us? No, still can't hear us. Okay. Well, Shaun, jump in here. We'll keep trying to fix
I'll
this
jump
up.
in.
Here we go.
Yeah. So you'd said you introduced the idea with how we have to live the brand that we've created. And I don't feel that way at all. I just do me. Now, having said that, I do want to be careful because I have been inconsistent on social media to some degree. And let me explain that real briefly. So pretty much anyone who meets me, who knows me, who gets to know me through social media and then meets me in person says, man, you're exactly like your social media. And that when they say that, that surprises me because I think, yeah, of course I am. What else would I be? But I guess that's not the case for everyone out there. They're sort of living two lives, perhaps. They're living we'll call it their regular life, and then they're living their perhaps inauthentic social media life. And maybe that's the norm. I don't know. I'm not used to that. I'm just used to me and my friends who I think are legit and live the life that, they represent on social media. So, having said that, when I first started out on social media, of course, friends had asked me to get involved in it to try to be helpful in the mental health space and for veterans predominantly, and then first responders and Leo. And then it just started building out until there was this much broader demographic that I was engaging in. But right from the get-go, I had no idea how to do any of this. I mean, none. I just didn't know. I just stepped into the void and started doing things. And those initial phases, I kind of treated them almost like a military operation. I started thinking like recce, like a recon guy. I went out and I started probing. I started doing fast and light, swift reconnaissance. And that swift reconnaissance doesn't really let you understand things deeply. It just lets you understand things quickly. And so my initial foray into social media was more like recce. Because I was probing in all kinds of 360s, I was doing things that probably weren't serving me or the community well. But I had to figure things out. And then at a certain point, I started thinking like, man, I'm taking on some load and I've got to go deeper. And I started thinking like a pathfinder. And so then I started pathfinding my way into social media. And I found that I really enjoyed it. But then I had to switch from being a pathfinder on social media to I had to step back and take a more of a broader view of things so that I didn't get lost in the white noise. I didn't get too deep into things and lose perspective. So then I had to start thinking like an army sniper or special operations sniper. And so that's how my social media has gone. I went from recce to pathfinder to sniper and then modulating back between all three of them. That's literally how I've done most of my social media. Now, all along the way, in my head, what I was doing was trying to create something where I could be of help to others. But as it turns out, it took my dog, putting down my dog just yesterday. It took that incident or that event to make me realize how much it has given back to me. I thought I was all out there, doing it for everyone, which, I am. I just didn't realize how much was going to come back to me because of that. I have had hundreds of DMs. I've had texts, I've had calls, I've had videos, I've had WhatsApp, I've had Signal, I've had it all. It's been, to some degree, not overwhelming, but it's been a lot for a guy like me who feels things. So, the whole social media thing, I think, you should be your own authentic brand. You shouldn't have to contrive anything on social media. There's tons of contrived personalities out there. The world is desperate for authentic people, even when they're not doing it well, like I wasn't at the start. And still, to today, I'm still not doing it great, but I'm doing it better. And so I think people are desperate for, like, even old dudes like me are trying to figure it out, because they know that I'm trying my best to do it for real, to be helpful. And as it turns out, it is equally as helpful back to me. So for everyone who reached out, I'll take this moment right now to thank everyone regarding Strider, my family, and, the last few days. It's been really nice. I really genuinely, I'm thankful. So there you go.
Yeah, I think, to your point though, you've always authentically been yourself, even through those stages. You've always authentically been yourself through this, and that's the brand of Shaun is still the same brand, no matter what we do. Jenny, how's your audio coming through now?
Loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. So let's get your first thoughts on this, on living the brand.
Living the brand, yeah. And I don't know what I missed, the first several minutes. I think touching a little bit on what Shaun has said of, like, humanity is desperate for authenticity, because we are all looking for that embodiment, that lived example of what it is to be authentic. And, in my work with revolutionary leadership, for revolutionaries, you're embodying a consciousness that is not here yet. That's why, like, that desperation, that the pain within that desperation is pointing to us the direction that our path is being illuminated in. That it doesn't feel good because we're meant to grow. And if we talk about living your brand, the level of majority of consciousness currently is looking at performative, external. And because that's no longer serving us just to look at the external, we're now being forced in ways to go inward, because you are always meant to harness both the internal as well as the external. And so living a brand, whether you have a business attached to it or not, it is meant to bring you to your highest self, is to let go of these illusions that we've lived under. And where we're going now, what we're doing here in the collective in these talks, and it is showing humanity. It is us sharing our vulnerabilities, our lives, our lived experiences, moving in this direction that we're moving towards.
I dig it. It's interesting because I went physical with this as well. Is that, Seb was actually out at the ranch a little while ago for the branding in May, and I was thinking about the physical branding, like when animals are branded, or even when people will get branded. I can think of, like, the Yellowstone show. They have people brand as part of the crew. I remember there was a movie a while ago back in the 90s where a bunch of Marines were branding USMC onto themselves. And I think, at least in my mind, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, is that to truly live a brand means you have to live an idea or an ideal, something that is more than what you are right now. And do you think that really is what it is seeking something higher, or do you think it's something completely different? I'm going to come back to go around the table again. Seb, to you, what do you got?
Well, I can't speak to anybody else because I don't know what their motivation is, ultimately behind what it is that they are doing. But I really like the idea of treating ourselves to our level of potential. And that's precisely what Jenny was talking about earlier, is instead of treating ourselves to the level at which we operate now, treating ourselves to a level of potential opens up this incredibly diverse field of growth, so to speak, because the introspection that acknowledges either a shortcoming or something that's status quo is revealing something to us. And in that conviction, we can really take action to make sure that we elevate to a higher form of ourselves. And generally speaking, if you tie that into, say, a highly performing team or a team that you're a part of, then each individuals have to treat themselves to their level of potential so that the team may, reach a point to the level of the potential of the team. So now it becomes a reverberation in a collective through an introspection and exposure and an addressing of issues. And so I think that either way, the chicken or the egg, which one of those two is coming first is pretty irrelevant, as long as the foundational sort of reasons that the foundational posture that we take aims and serves the purpose of elevation for the self or the collective.
I like that. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I do. So it's because you were talking about someone getting physically branded. Okay. That to me is a static mindset. I mean, now it's on you. Now it is. Then what? How do you grow out of that brand? Like you put another brand on top of it. You add an extra word to it, an extra letter. You know what I'm saying? Now you're stuck with the thing that you wanted to make permanent. And I don't think life has permanency, much like Jenny said. I think that one of the scariest parts of life is not knowing where your life is going, which direction you're supposed to take it, why you're here. And so stepping out into the unknown every single day can be a bit of a freak show, but it's way easier when you're branded, because then you know what you are. Then you know where you're supposed to stand. You know which group you're in. I don't subscribe to that, man. And I know that sounds like judgy perhaps, but I've just never really branded myself. I just am who I am. And I live the life that I live. I've got the friends that I've got. I've got the things that are around me that I want and need. The things that I don't have, that I want, I will get, unless I'm not supposed to get them. But I'm constantly seeking. I'm constantly trying to evolve. I'm always trying to move higher, whatever that means. And higher doesn't mean to beat anyone other than myself and this game of life that we're all in. Now, what is the game of life? Well, that's a podcast that we've had in the past. And I think that is more of a constructive element of this conversation of living the brand is what is living? You kind of got to ask a question before we ask this question. And so living the brand, I think to some degree, is fairly one-dimensional. But as soon as you ask the broader question of living your life, that's a much bigger question. And it adds enough complexity that it makes it interesting, if you follow me.
I'm tracking. Jenny, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, touching on, reaching a higher frequency. And I'll often use that same reference as well. And I think, again, if we go back to just the external, we're going to be viewing higher in a visual sense, further out, higher. But actually, when you come back to your authentic self, you're actually unlearning and undoing all the layers, all the conditioning that's been placed on you. And it's actually more of a returning back more than, moving forward, so to speak. And that's where the paradox, the duality, the dichotomy comes in. It's just like, it's kind of a, a mind, I'll use the word duck because I say the F word a lot. And, I think something that's really important going back to that physical branding is oftentimes there's a lot of rigidity in that. We want to identify with this thing because ego is always looking for certainty. it doesn't like the unknown. And so it feels safe for the nervous system, for our mind. All the aspects of us feel safer when we know, like this perception of safety, when we have something that we can say that we feel certain about. And so I will not necessarily caution, I do want to bring light to this, which is when you're so rigid to something and it doesn't serve you, God will intervene to strip that illusion from you. And however tight you want to hold on to that is how much pain, or the pain is inevitable, but the suffering is how long you choose to hold on to that identity. And so with us talking about moving into uncertainty, it is in that void that we find that we can trust ourselves. If we look back at our lives and we look at all the times, everything we've gone through, no one ever knows where they're actually going, no matter what they want to say to you and tell you that this is going to happen in A, B, C, D, Z, right? That is where wisdom is built. That is where wisdom is harnessed, is in that uncertainty and that willingness to trust and have faith.
I dig it. I dig it. The I was thinking as you were talking, like in order to reach higher, in order to go beyond what we are right now, we have to focus inward in order to find out what we aren't right now as well, which is something Shaun was saying on the last podcast. I got a couple comments here. Shaun, you got something? You look like you got something. No? Okay. Dan jumped in here. He said, the vapid babble on social media today is mind-numbingly aggravating. I've listened to all of you, and it's not only an enormous breath of fresh air, I don't need to analyze your statements for reality. This is a really great point in the fact that we all, as Shaun said earlier, when people meet us on the street, I've been told this as well. Oh, you're just like you are online. And yeah, because this is who we are. And then Grey Dad Gear jumped in here. He said, living on brand for me would be living the ethos of the principles and convictions of one who seeks growth and personal development. And Grey Dad, you're another great example of this. But I have a question for you guys specifically, and it's where do people get it wrong? Where do you think the mistakes happen when people are trying to either live on brand or try to create a brand for themselves or try to live a life that is theirs? Where do you think the missteps happen? Jenny, I'm going to come right back to you. What do you think?
It's one, I'll come back to this a lot, which is this is new consciousness that we're arriving at. Like everything that we're discussing here, we're privy to new information, so to speak, or we're willing to step into that unknown at least, right? Because everyone in some aspect of their lives is having a pain point that is pushing them to move forward, yet we've chosen to answer that and to engage with that, not as a better or worse, just as fact, right? Where do most people get it wrong? We're leaving the people-pleasing era. There's many layers to this. There's our primal hardwiring, which says, I need to belong. So let me see what everyone else is doing, what everyone else thinks about what I think, and let me kind of make this recipe that's a little bit me and maybe a lot more other people, right? And that's when we're taken out of our authenticity. And not to say that we can't find more of our authenticity in others, but again, it is that people-pleasing aspect of looking for external validation of, oh, okay, everyone's agreeing with me. That's a good sign. Whereas that's kind of not what you want when you're seeking to advance humanity.
I'm digging. Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that the fact that there are, physiological things that happen when you get your instant gratification, your little pleasure hormones flooding your body and doing all that good stuff. And of course, that creates throff, and those throff are going to require that you reload and get another hit. And so, there's mental, emotional, physical, and all kinds of things interconnected. Of course, we're trying to silo out of all of that generally as humans, but the reality is those things are all interconnected. And I think that you can easily go from having the right intent and jumping on to do the right thing and doing it correctly, and slowly, without the proper checks and balances, you can start creeping back to something that you no longer are. So you could be living with absolute authenticity, go down a certain rabbit hole and start taking seemingly innocuous actions on the daily. And if you don't have the right checks and balances, and when I say that, I look at Sean or any of you on the panel that will actually call people out and their friends out, and because that's what friends are for. But without that, you are now, edging towards the very real possibility of becoming a version of yourself that's no longer living its authentic life, its authentic self for everybody to see. And again, the for everybody to see has a caveat, because nobody cares. What you should care about is what you're living for yourself in relation to you, and what you perceive yourself to be, not what everybody else thinks of you. All that being said, there are certain things that obviously you have to be mindful of, because things taken out of context can really affect things. And if you decide that on your business account you're going to put up the meme that's super dark, and that all your closest friends would kill themselves laughing, and well, send it to your closest friend, just don't post it, and start sending the wrong message, and you could be your authentic self, and the sort of the default setting should be, well, this is me, I'm just gonna, but there is still a piece of risk management and logic that needs to be applied against that. Like, if you're taking something completely out of context, what is the benefit of you posting it versus the issues that are going to rise as a result of it? And so I think that regardless of the authenticity conversation, there are still obviously things that need to be filtered, right? Like, I don't think that we could 100% launch into some of the things that we normally would do with the person that know us so viscerally and so deeply that there's never a questioning of our character in relation to this, but there can be. And so that's sort of my balance point, right? Where you bring a little bit of balance to this conversation and say, hey, the reality is we don't want to be seeking external validation. We want to be acting on internal validation. We want to do all those things, but we also have to be mindful that there is an impact of whatever it is that we do as an impact, and we still have to be mindful of what it is that we do.
I like this, and I have maybe a little bit of pushback on this one too, because the idea that we shouldn't seek external validation, I agree with for the most part, but there is some external validation that we absolutely do seek and should seek, right? Like from certain people in our lives, from significant others, from sometimes from parents, sometimes from children. Like, there are times where that external validation is a good thing, and it reinforces who you are, the brand, the authenticity of like, yep, no, this makes sense, this is who you are. But you can't just do that for everybody, all the randos on the street. I'm just like, tell me what to do. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yes, I think where it goes wrong is when someone has a vision of what they want to occur or what they want to achieve, and a misunderstanding of the timeline that it takes to achieve what they want. And more often than not, that misunderstanding is it should take 2 years, but they're going to try and do it in 1.5 weeks. And so they start striving towards something, and by about day 4, they realize that they're not going to get it done by day 11. And so that's when, to some degree, the frustration sets in, or the resentment, or the fill in the gap. And so then they will modify their direction. They will modify their approach. They will modify their delivery. Now you'll hear a little tone in their voice. And that tone is their frustration or their anger or their desperation to have you join in their vision. Because ultimately a vision is a singular vision, but you hope, if it's a good vision, that others will join you in the understanding of what that vision can bring for others. And so the frustration leaks in, and then the calm, collected approach to something then has enough tone in it that it's a bit of anger. And then it's yelling. And then it's slamming your fist on the desk and wagging your finger, and now it's divisive. And now, with some division in place, you get more eyeballs. And more eyeballs feeds the monster. And then the yelling gets more. And then there's more yelling than there is talking. And then there's more yelling than there is thinking. And then it's just yelling. And it doesn't matter what the feedback is, because you can't hear the feedback because you're yelling so loud. And so I think it goes wrong nowadays because a lot of people misunderstand the timeline that it takes to achieve the vision that you've set for yourself, and it doesn't show up when you want. Now, with that said, I just do want to cherry pick out a distinction here, perhaps, and it is an important one, in so much that I might have a vision for Shaun and what I want for my life and the immediate people around me. And then I've got a grander vision, and that's a vision for the broader world. And those can be two different things. And so one can facilitate the other. And this other can actually facilitate the one. But you have to understand how to synchronize yourself with the broader pipeline of your vision for everyone else. And if you can't synchronize those two things, it's not a big deal, because that lack of perfect synchronization allows you to bounce off the edges of the pipeline back and forth. You keep touching yourself and moving past yourself and bouncing off the walls of the pipeline as you singularly move down it, pulling everyone down a pipeline with you, perhaps, or them encouraging you to go down the pipeline. Whether you're being pulled or pushed is neither here nor there. As I see it, there are two existences, as it were, your singular and your world. And I think that the two can play well together, but only if you find a harmonic synchronization that allows enough tension for everyone to gain along the journey.
I'm going to go around again. Jenny, you got any thoughts on what Shaun just laid down?
Yes. I think what you're what I'm taking from it, at least, Shaun, is you're talking about the joy of mastery, right? Where we have this need, this desire for instant gratification. We think, oh, I have this goal and it's going to happen, in 2 steps, without any sort of disruptions or complications. And a lot of that is fear of failure, right? And then it's also this conditioned perfection in us, because it hasn't been safe to make mistakes, right? When we're a child, we get scolded or yelled at for doing something wrong, according to whom, right? And then in the workplace, we could have been fired, we could have been reprimanded, we could have been broken up with. Like, so many aspects in life, when we feel like we've made this mistake, there's always been this dire consequence to it. So that deters us from, again, moving towards, like, we're so resistant to these actual feedback, because in that feedback, when we don't get what we want, we're actually growing, because now our capacity to engage with more challenge, that's what's happening there. But we often don't pay attention to that. And so, if we could surrender to that process, to that joy of mastery, I think even these conversations that we're having start to open up just the idea of that on the surface level. And as we engage in more conversations and we share more of our lived experiences in the depth of it, it then gives people permission, which actually is a big word that's been coming to me in terms of embodiment, is that we are often looking for permission for safety to move forward and take imperfect action and allow whatever that wants to be unfolded to unfold.
I like this concept of permission. I was thinking about that the other day as well. Is like I know I have done this on multiple occasions, especially with my wife. There's lots of times where I'll look over and be like, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'm just looking for like a nod or some sort of permissive moment of like, yeah, we can manage that. That's a great point. Seb, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. I have a few things. Like for me, when we discuss the prospect of life's anything that happens in life being inherently neutral and being assigned a positive, negative value on account of the person that's processing it and how they're going to frame it, I think we can really see where some of these are affecting us in a negative way. So, for example, to take the example of, Jenny talking about, the consequences that we suffered and the magnified consequences that we attach to it, because let's call a spade, a spanking. Like, okay, some people do that for fun later in life. So, but the point is, and where I'm going with this is, say, for example, if my mom was adamant that I would be on my knees facing the wall 3 inches away, through a story, 3 inches away from the wall, standing upright, and stay there for like 15, 20 minutes without moving. And I perceived this as being the worst thing that ever happened to me. But really what it created, and I don't suggest we parent like this, just to be clear, but the fact is it allowed me to be able to stay with my thoughts and be internal and actually address things in my own head, because I had nowhere to go, nothing to see, nothing to distract myself doing any of this. Now, take the same scenario and take a scenario of somebody that assigns so much value on being, say, bullied, and again, a reality that I face, that Shaun faced, that many of us have, I'm sure, and that's just a reality. But there is a reframing that can happen there that empowers the person that was on the wrong end of this and prevents them from obviously falling in victimhood and try to overcompensate for this. But we start looking at, when I go to the Muay Thai gym and I'm sparring with these killers that are making me look like I've never thrown a punch in my life, and then I get on the mats with some guys on the UFC roster just to realize that, man, I don't know anything about fighting, but I did that willfully, and it brought in an incredible amount of growth. Well, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that you created a set of circumstances that's twice as bad as being spanked, but you enjoyed it and actually grew you? Yeah. Okay. So how is this other thing that was a quarter of what you experienced created all these issues? Like, where is the discrepancy here? Is it the magnification on account of, you were younger, you couldn't process the information nearly as much, and so it carried a bigger emotional load, but it's not gone. It's still there, and you're still addressing it in the same way. So you can still address it in the way that you should have at the time, should you have had the right tools to do it. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but essentially it's just this whole piece of reframing what it is that you are projecting and why, with that, all of these are opportunities to realize the benefits that you've gained from all the hard things that you went through, all the adversity, all of those things. And so it's not to take the value, it's not to invalidate how you felt at the time. That's totally warranted. There's no question. But how are we going to drag that moving forward to elevate out of that instead of the old victimhood trap?
I do like the idea of just seeing you getting manhandled on the mats by a UFC level dude, just because the last time you and I rolled, you made it very clear I knew nothing about jiu-jitsu. So, Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a handful of things. I'll whip through them pretty quickly. On the aspect of whatever you faced in your past, in your young life, in your life a year ago, whatever the case is, we all have to face hardships, and we all have to figure it out, and we all have to move forward. As I was, I woke up really, I didn't get much sleep last night for whatever reason, but I woke up super early this morning watching the sunrise, and I was like, man, this freaking sucks. My dog's dead. This sucks. Oh, that's a nice sunrise. So I grabbed a photo of it. And then I was like, man, this freaking sucks. There's this big space behind my chair right now. My dog's gone. What the hell, man? How am I going to move forward out of this? I was like, well, Pathfinder course was pretty freaking hard. I think I can manage my dog, I suppose. I've got tools in my pocket. I've done some hard things. I've figured some hard things out. That's what I was telling myself. And I think that's what everyone's got to tell themselves. Anytime you bump up against these roadblocks or these hardships or these moments in the past, 1 year ago, a million years ago, whatever the case is, you should be able to reframe it through some other adversity that you faced in your life and say, okay, look, this is only 90% of that, or this is only 10% of that, or whatever the case is. Just some simple contextualization to understand that you've managed things in the past and you'll manage this thing now. Another thing that I'd like to throw out there is on the bullying aspect. I think that, and bullying is just a proxy. It could be any number of hardships that a person faces in their life. I wouldn't want to have been bullied when I was a kid, but I was. But now, as a grown man, anytime any young person, starts talking to me about how they're being bullied or they just got out of a bullying situation, I can look them square in the eye and have that conversation with them. I have life experience to be able to help them reframe their life, perhaps. And so the lessons that we learn are for us, but they're also for others. And so you've got kind of two jobs. You've kind of got to create two stories. You kind of got to create two brands, as it were. The brand for yourself inside your inner world that makes it all make sense. And then the brand for the outer world that is the exploration with that other person or persons that helps them understand their world. I mean, we've just gone through a 4-year exercise on this, Seb and I. 4 years of talking about this kind of stuff and helping ourselves through the process, I believe will help others through this process. Someone hit me up in my DMs today. Shout out to Laird and Co. And he said, how you making out with the dog and all of that good stuff? And I said, yeah, it's kind of sucks, man, but I'll be all right. I've done harder things. And he said, words to the effect, I'm not going to quote him specifically, but he said, man, for everything that you guys do on the podcast and for everything that you and Seb have done in this book, I think that, what you guys are doing, and when I say you guys, I mean all of us, what you're all doing is righteous, is good. And so by the end of this podcast, I might not be any wiser as to what my brand is, but I do know that branding is important. And I think that the branding that is of the greatest importance is the internal branding, not the external branding, but the external branding is helpful for others.
I'm loving where this is going. We got a comment here I just want to touch on. Glenn jumped in here. Good to see you, Glenn. He said, Seb's part reminded me of where there is post-traumatic stress, there is an opportunity for post-traumatic growth. And this is a great point. And to your point, Shaun, of sitting on the deck, you're thinking of your dog, but you're able to recognize that there is a beautiful sunset. You're able to take the time to take the photo. You're able to slide from each portion of feeling into each portion of feeling. And I think it's on brand for you, which that's what you've been not only preaching, but like you do it on a regular basis. So
it is on brand. But I do want to be careful because a lot of people have like reached into me on the video that I put up just a couple of days ago, black and white, where I was scratching my dog's ear and basically pretty much my last day with him. Mm-hmm. And they reached out to me. People have called me and had conversations on the phone about how helpful that was for them, how it's helped them move through their dog's passing or their dog that is just about to, or fill in the gaps. And what has been described to me is like how gracefully I did it. But man, that took a lot of effort. It took a lot of effort. That wasn't just like easy peasy lemon squeezy Shaun all just in the flow zone. Like I was in the zone and I was flowing, but I knew why I was there. And it wasn't just to tell Shaun a story. It was to try to help others. Like my journey in that moment was trying to help others in their journey. So if it came across as graceful and authentic and etc., it was a real moment for sure. But it also had a veneer on it that was me trying to serve at a higher level than just complaining about my dog. And so I think that's a really important aspect of, this conversation is understanding what you're saying and why you're saying it. Are you saying it just to yourself or are you saying it to others?
I think also on top of that is that it's a snippet. This is where I think people get a little confused in terms of social media, is that the image that you put up that's not your whole day. Like you weren't gracefully walking through your day holding on to Strider the whole time, right? Like that was a small piece of your day that you wanted to share. And that when we look at social media, we have to, especially social media, we have to remember that is a piece of someone's day. When we interact with them on the street or have a road rage incident with people, whatever it is, that is a piece of a day. It is not all of encompassing all of now and that kind of concept. Seb, what do you got?
No, I just wanted to jump on the last inject, which was, you sort of Shaun having or doing whatever it is, like seeing the sunset, seeing the things, seeing. So there's a distinction that has to be made here. There is a conscious choice that needs to happen there, because gray and rain and clouds will roll even if the sun blasts everywhere when things go sideways. And you will find that the first thing that generally goes when it comes to life is color. When you lose a person or a dog or a situation that creates such inner turmoil and inner sadness, that you will find that the largest sunset in the world doesn't quite cut it. It's still gray, it's still black and white, it's still all of those things. Those are experienced by absolutely everybody. I've been through this hard after a very difficult breakup and multi breakups over the course of my years, because as it turns out, I wasn't the man I was supposed to be. So I sucked at relationship, but the reality is what really changed everything. The game changer for me was when I started understanding that the things that you feel like doing and the things that you have to be doing are two different things, and they're often at odds. And you're not going to feel like going to the gym after a breakup. You're not going to feel like eating. You're not going to feel like engaging socially. You're not going. However, all of those things are beneficial if they're balanced properly. And all of those things are not only beneficial, they can have catastrophic consequences. So just think of it this way. If you're going through a breakup, and whether you're responsible or not, or you share responsibility, is completely irrelevant. But the bottom line is you took a beating and you find yourself in a very difficult situation. And now to make things better, you're going to stop working out, because that's going to really work the way you want it to. Now you're going to get out of shape too. So now you're out of shape, plus your other problems, plus your potential health jeopardized, and all of those things. And so the distinction and nuance I was wanting to make is, for somebody that might miss it, Shaun didn't just so happen to have a built-in radar for the sun that was out on the deck that day. He didn't want to see the sun that day. He made himself see the sun that day. He made himself take a picture of the sun that day. And all of this served the purpose of coming out of that hole. And we have to take action. There is no coming out of a hole, somebody miraculously extending a hand, although that can be useful. You need to be reaching for the hand. You need to be trying to build something that you can stand on. You need to be trying to climb. You need to be doing things. And when that happens and somebody meets you in the middle and and extends a hand, and you grab the hand and you're being pulled out of that well, you've done everything you could to help with that situation. But for you to lay in a fetal position at the bottom isn't going to work ever. It just isn't. And so I just wanted to make that distinction, man. It's not that you feel like doing the things that you should be doing, is that you must do them.
Yeah, I could not agree more. When I go deep into depressive episodes, you're right. Color is one of the first things that disappears. Everything becomes very, very, very dark and gray. And it reminds me, there's an old Simpsons episode from many, many years ago, and there's a line in it that I try to repeat to myself. It's a little mantra when I'm really in the hole, and it is dig up, stupid. And it reminds me to just like, digging isn't going to help right now. It's just not going to help. We need to figure out a different way to do this. And it's just something that I tell myself pretty regularly to help me break through those mental barriers that are everything saying, like, I don't feel like this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do these things. Well, dig up, stupid. And then I'm like, oh, right. Okay. Now I gotta get to work. So that's where I'm going. Jenny, you got any additional thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, actually quite a bit. That's what Shaun was saying about you're almost building two brands. I'd like to reframe that, because it's still, and I wholeheartedly get where he's coming at. One is the internal work, and the second is the external, and how do we assist others in the process that we just went through. That's the whole reason why we go through any challenges that we do. Is again in service to our fellow humans, because we are our own poison and we are our own antidote to what you're saying. All the pain that we have gone through in our lives, they're again pointing us to a direction, and it's usually in the opposite. And what I mean by that is just a short share of my personal experience. My father was very physically, mentally, emotionally abusive when I was growing up. And that inadvertently has put me on a path of self-preservation and learning how to protect myself in every way, right? Emotionally, mentally, physically. And so the pain is never there just to torture you. It's not there for any other reason than to grow you. Whatever has ailed you, we're meant to grow in the opposite of that thread. And so going back to what Shaun was saying about the internal, the external, and the two brand, rather it's one, but it is a very separate process, because we know what we've gone through in our own lives and what we're going through currently. But it takes a different requirement to skillfully unpack and to share with the rest of the world of what that process even was for you. And so I could be wrong, but that's what I'm getting from what you were sharing, Shaun. And again, it's so that we are a beacon for the world, right? We don't even have to try to do things to be better for other people. When we show up in conversations and we're fully vulnerable with what we've experienced, that alone is going to unlock and again give permission for folks to move forward. And this is another paradox, duality, dichotomy, is like, what Seb said is like, when we're in fetal position, there's a right amount of everything. There's a right amount of pain. There's a right amount of quote unquote good and bad, right? And I want to remove that stigma that in the addiction loops, in the fetal position, in all of our distractions from feeling the pain of that discomfort and the disease within us, that is all a part of your process as well. We don't hit rock bottom for no reason. And so many stories come from rock bottom. And this kind of brings me back to the very beginning of Shaun sharing about the passing of his dog. And my heart is out to you, Shaun. It's heartbreaking. And it is in our grief. I mean, grief is so powerful. It breaks us in ways to allow for us to feel the beauty of life. When that color comes back into our life, it is because we have been willing to let that pain and that grief completely break us, and we become a new vessel in that process. And so it is that contrast of, I can laugh so lightheartedly at whatever happens in life because I've gone to the very deep, dark depths.
I'm digging it. It's there's a Japanese practice, and I can't remember the name of it, of putting gold into cracked stoneware, right? And that reminds me very much of that, of being able to not only pick up the pieces, but then using the memories, using the good times to reattach all those pieces together, so you have that vessel back together, and that's fantastic.
I do want to ask a question to Alia. I don't know if we've kind of covered this yet. I don't think we have. How do you know when you're doing it right? Like, how do you know when your brand is good? How do you know when you're achieving whatever it is that you had hoped to achieve in life, whatever that is, which most people don't even have a definition of most of the time. And so I'm just going to give a quick example. Happened this morning, and we'll see where it goes. So, of course, I was up super duper early, watched the sunrise, did my thing, and then Doreen came downstairs at about 06:30 hours. And she came over, we had our little hug, and had our sad faces on. And then she said, do you know what happened last night? I was like, what? Because I'm usually the last one who goes to bed at night. I like to hunt at night. And so I said, no, what happened? And she said, about 11 o'clock at night, Evan came in to our master bedroom. I was downstairs in the home theater. And he said, how you doing, Mom? And she said, good, just thinking a lot about Strider Boy. And he said, and this is crazy. He said, do you know what could help? Dad taught me this a long time ago. And she said, what? And he said, all you have to do is when the invasive thought, the rumination, when you can't get it out of your head, there's just one simple trick. Does anyone know what it is? Does anyone know what I'm about to say?
I think I know what it is, yeah.
What are you going to guess it?
Is it Kung Fu fighting?
My man. Everybody was Kung Fu fighting, baby. Do you know how many times I've used everybody Kung Fu fighting in my life? I've been using that
a bunch
for
of times on the
decades.
show, that's for sure.
Decades. When times are tough, when I've got it all up in my melon, everybody was Kung Fu fighting, baby. And so you got to have a trick. You got to have a hack. You got to have a little Harry Potter magic wand in these moments sometimes. You got to have a wedge or something that you can deploy at these times. But it wasn't so much the wedge that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about right now is the brand. So when Doreen told me that this morning, I thought, and I think this is a pretty easy logic, I thought to myself, man, my job here is done. My son is passing on pro tips to my wife, just as I would have. And so, isn't that beautiful? You know what I'm saying? And so, how do you know when you're doing it right?
That's a dang good question. I'm going to hit Seb right off the bat. What do you think?
How do you know when you're doing anything right? And I think depending on everything, really, the environment, the social definition of right, your what the desirable outcome is in your head, what the desirable outcome is on account of anybody else, the mission statement you stated for yourself, were you authentic to yourself? All of those things have to be factored in to see if you've done something right. And it's a really, this is the cognitive part of me speaking. Now, emotionally, if I'm doing something and there is a return on investment, such as what happened last night, and let's forget about the fact that your son passed on a pro tip to his mom at 11 o'clock that you gave him. Let's just focus on the fact that your son checked on his mom at 11 o'clock at night, like went and knocked on the door. Fundamentally, that's an incredible feat in itself. If he'd said nothing other than mom, just checking on you, it would have already been an amazing measure of success. But he went a step further and was able to offer some thoughts to help her through the process, which, if that's not success, I don't know what is. So when it comes to me and say my own personal mission statement, if it's meaningful and it affects somebody in a positive way, and that person reaches out and says to me, you know what, the last thing you posted or the conversation you had or the book or whatever it is that you were engaged in gave me something to think about, and it reframed some of my ideas, I am all in for success on that. And it's not personal success. This is grace. It's like, you know what? I absolutely love the fact that your life has been made infinitesimally better by a small thing that you were able to, that came in from the right angle, that you were able to latch onto and perhaps grow a little bit or build a little bit. And in the process, I often get something out of it too, as Shaun alluded to earlier, because those conversations generally lead to some of the things that I can learn by engaging with that person who I may or may not know, but that's providing me feedback. And when they're providing me feedback and they're opening the door for vulnerability, because that's what it is. I mean, calling another man and saying, hey man, like what you are doing is helping me. That takes stones, man. Like that takes stones to do that. It takes humility to do that. When I say stones, I don't mean it in the super masculine type of way. I simply mean like it takes inner fortitude, and it takes to do that, because you're automatically, quote unquote, assigning a level of power to that person. If that person was to wield it in the wrong way, it could be very detrimental or definitely not beneficial. And it's not that you're actually doing that, but that's the perception that we have as people that have a hard time asking for help or have a hard time having conversations about the things that we're going through with other people that we perceive have it together, right? And I say perceive because none of us do. Like we all we all kind of blindly feel our way around, guys. Like you just get better at picking up the little streams of lights coming through. That's pretty much it. And so I don't want to extend too long, but for me, it's the little things. There is no massive outcome that I am seeking. There is no big reveal on the 20 years of work that you've done to help the collective or all of those things. There certainly isn't, and for me, shouldn't be any reward per se in that, other than knowing that to a certain extent it helped a bunch of people along the way. That's really all that should matter. And so I find that when you have reasonable outcomes like this, you're going to hit micro wins daily. You're always going to win. And when you find yourself in a dark spot, what is one of the, aside from the experiences and the adversity that you've been through, that you've overcame, that you can draw upon, there's another piece, which is the micro wins that you tallied up over the course of the last 20 years. How many times a week? So imagine this. Imagine if the world gets dark and all of those things, and eventually you start thinking about all these people that have reached in to say how meaningful what you have said or done was in relation to their own lives, and how many people they affected as a result of that, and what's the footprint on this. It can be very, very far reaching. And I think that having those micro wins. Now, I will tie this in lastly to one of the things that we tend to do as humans is to seek outcomes that are substantial, things that are flashy, things that are big, things that are measurable. And this is our data-minded scientific mind that, overstate the value of that in relation to the smaller events that are really the fundamental fabric of life. The good night kisses, the having the story time, the genuine bro hug that you get from a bro you haven't seen in a while, all of the things, those are really all that matters in the end. Like we project all of these things and we seek all of these worldly things, like the nice car, the money, the this, the that, whatever, all of it completely inconsequential in the big scheme of things. And there will be a time in your life or mine and everybody's life where the amount of energy where you realize that the amount of energy that you spend on the wrong things is literally an aberration and a misuse of lifespan. And so, but that's just part of the process. We need to be learning that. And so you can't just say, well, skip that part and you're going to be right where you need to be, because it just doesn't work that way. But it's important to have that underlying idea fundamentally in our head, so that eventually when it starts creeping out that way, you can redirect your thoughts and be like, you know what? I'm at the point in my life now where these worldly things are completely meaningless to me. It's a small things and I see it everywhere. And so when it comes to winning, it takes a lot less to win than what we give it credit for.
That's a beautiful point. Jenny, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. It is this, going back to what Seb was saying about the material world, right? How I know I'm on the right path is when I had a certain illusion coming into this challenge, whatever it was, that's been stripped of me. That, again, all the challenges are here to expand our perception of what's true. And when that gets removed and you're now seeing things in a different light, like Shaun said, if you place a wedge, no matter how small or big, between what you previously thought, you're usually going in the right direction. And it is slightly vague in the sense of the internal sense is felt. There's just a piece about where you've arrived at, whatever that, that destination is. And the external is the impact of hearing people share how the difference that you've made in their lives. And yeah, like that's how I would gauge it.
I like it. I like it. I was I actually wrote down here very early on, being a cowboy. This is how I recognize that like I'm doing it right is when I don't have to think about what it is I'm trying to do. And I'm just doing the thing. So like when I'm editing or I'm podcasting, I don't have to think about being a podcaster. I don't have to think about being an editor. I can just do the job without thinking about it. When I am out on the ranch and I'm working animals, I don't have to think about that anymore. When I first started all these things, I had to think about it. I had to process it in real time. I had to do the reps per se, and I had to try to think like, you know, if I'm working cattle in a corral or if I'm training a horse or something like that. When I first started, I had to dress like the cowboy. I had to wear the right boots. I had to wear the hat. I had to do the things. I had to play the part. Whereas when I know I'm doing it right, I could do it in my underwear, and I'd be fine, and I'd still be the cowboy, right? So that's, I think, in my mind, where the critical piece is that, and it's not so much just doing the reps so you don't have to think about it. It's that once I don't have to think about it and it feels right, because we talked about vibes the other day, Shaun, when we were talking about music, and like it has to feel right. It can't just be right. It can't just look right. It has to feel right when you're doing it. And I think that's a critical piece to this. Now, we are just over an hour now, and I got a couple really good quotes or really good comments and one question, and then we can get some final thoughts here. So I just want to hit on these real quick. Catherine Hirschfeld jumped in here earlier. She said, "This is great stuff. As a person now in my 60s, I reflect a lot about my life. I've rebranded myself several times over the years. All my life experiences have taught me to live intentionally." And that's such a beautiful point. Dan C. jumped in here. He said, "It's you. Learning who you are over the last year, it is you. And knowing you and your family, that old dude had an amazing life right to the cab ride to the other side to wait for you." 100%. Great Ad Gear jumped in here. Quote I love to live by is, "Be the example people need to see. When you can show others it is possible to overcome the challenges before you, you inspire your younger self to stay in the fight," which is absolutely true. John Minari jumped in here. Good to see you, John. He says, "I'm so sorry for your family's loss, brother." And yeah, the entire collective is thinking about you, Shaun, for sure. And then Catherine jumped in here with this question, and I just want to hit you all with it. Do you all feel that after deep loss and grief happens, that the joy and color ever truly returns to full brilliance? And I'm going to hit my thought on this one first, and then I'll go around the table. Yes. And I would say it actually returns to you see a new level of nuance after that loss and grief. Once you've processed through that whole system, it won't be the same colors that you see, but you will see more nuance that's what I've experienced. What do you guys think? Jenny, I'll hit you first.
I think it's a choice, right? Is it possible? Like, in short, yes, but it is a choice in whether you want to see that or not. And yeah, I think leaving it in short.
I like it. Shaun, what do you think?
Put the question back up again, please, so I can cherry pick it. Thank you. So here's my deal. Generally speaking, I think that, yes, you can, because I've done it many times. However, I want to add a little twist in there just to get everyone else thinking, not the panel, because we don't have time to build this out. But for anyone who's listening to this later, I'm throwing out a kind of a little puzzle, as it were, within this sentence. And so I think that you can try to focus on getting that joy and color and richness back, try to keep creating a richer tapestry, as it were. But I think that the process of deep loss and grief is a game unto itself. I love a game within a game. And I'm not making light. I'm not being dismissive of how hard deep loss and grief is. I understand how that is. But I think that in that process, there is a game that you can engage in, and that is freaking getting better at it. And by getting better at it, I mean like every iteration shouldn't be harder. It should be easier. And by easier, I don't mean like simplistic. I mean simply easier to move through the process, and perhaps most importantly of all, easier to explain it to others. You know, my sons are in their 20s now, and so if I can't explain to them or demonstrate to them or help them move through grief and loss as their dad, if I can't do that well, then I haven't been doing it well enough in the past. It's my job to have thought about these things enough and moved through them enough and got better at them enough, got better at the game of loss and grief, so that I can teach others the rule set. I can teach others the win condition. I can teach others the chaos theory of the moment. And so I don't think it's just a singular journey where you just are supposed to get better at this and create more color. I just think you're supposed to apply yourself so that you can do it better for others. And through that proxy of doing it better for others, 100% you'll get better at it for yourself.
Love it. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I will say yes on that. There's a variety of different caveats, but you know, I had the privilege of holding my 48-year-old mom in my arms when she passed away and took her last breath. I was telling the kids this story a couple of days ago, and that was in 2009. You know, a very, very brief battle with cancer, which many of us will be affected by. And you know, at the time, of course, colors were sucked out of everything, and that's just what's to be expected, and that needs to be not only expected, it needs to be embraced. It just happens. The colors are gone for a while, right? I'm gonna have to be rebuilding. I'm gonna have to take the time that it takes to grieve properly so that things can start slowly being injected with colors again. But I will say this, for me, a lot of the anchors that I used to overcome this massive hole in my heart, which was, you know, the single human that raised me, essentially, with hardly anybody else around, was now gone, and we were extremely close. And so it was a very difficult time. But there is so many things that affect the way that we interact with people when it comes to relationships. So I'll give you an example of this. As a very, very young boy, I knew very, very early that she wasn't going to be around for long. I just knew that. I've always known that. There was never a time in my life where at any age you would have asked me how long mom was going to stay around, that I would have said she's going to stay around to be 80 or 90. I always somehow knew that. And there was, I'm not sure what's there, but it was there. And now you might think, well, every 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-old is obviously afraid of and magnifying the fear of losing their parents. That's totally normal. But when it carries on to your teenage years, and, you know, really it becomes a question of something is telling me something, and I cannot deny it because it's been like this, you know, for eons, and it happens. So she ends up, you know, being sick and doing all the things. Well, one of the things I never had to worry about after her passing was her contribution never changed. Their past contribution didn't change. Our present contribution didn't change. And what I mean by that is, if you know Shaun enough, as I knew mom enough, and Shaun is not here, and you're looking at a problem set that you have, and you're like, what would Shaun do? What would Shaun say? You're able to actually tap into that, and you're able to speak to yourself as if you were Shaun, because you know that person enough. And so it was the same for me and mom. The only piece, you know, the physical piece is in the physical realm is very difficult for humans because we believe by sight, not by faith. But the reality of thinking that the oversimplification that if what we cannot see does not exist, I got some bad news. You know, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities to have the presence that you need. And oftentimes when I have conversations with people that have lost people they truly love, they never had a single sign that the person was either around or supporting them, or that some of their inner workings in the past had done some work on them while they were grieving. And the reason why that is because they're grief blind, right? I'm gonna think about only believing by sight, and therefore I don't see all the little nuances, the little synchronicities, the little things that would give the bigger picture away. And so the point I'm making here is this: as you are growing up with mom and you're consistently in fear of losing her, guess what I don't fear now? She's never dying again. right? So there is a change that happens there. Are you going to go back to what everything was the way it was? No, and you shouldn't. That is not the point of this journey. This isn't a playground. This is a battleground. We need to evolve out of things. And so, yes, we're going backwards, and we're looking at, that was a great time, and we loved everything about that time. But that time has passed. There is nothing we can do to affect that. So now what? So now I have to directionally sort of aim my life forward. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And so I have to be able to articulate to myself some of the decisions I'm going to make. So one of those decisions is I never have the stress of losing her. That's gone. That's something that plagued me for so long, right? So now I'm removing this. So I may have lost brilliance, so to speak, or colors, as it were, in losing her, but I've gained something by realizing she can never be taken away from me again. And now you can start building up. I'm using a very, very small sliver of the process that I was going through, but you can apply this and this type of filter on almost everything that you do when it comes to grief. And so it's to find the silver lining, and to say that there isn't a silver lining is completely inaccurate. Whether it's bringing your family back together, whether it's confirming all of the good that person has done in your life, all the contribution they've brought, all of the things, whatever it is, the things you had taken for granted, the love you hadn't said, all of the things are going to serve a positive purpose of growth in this lifetime. And that can be gifted to others through, the collective, the way in these conversations, these types of conversations, or simply with your kids or whatever the case is. And so although you are in love with the idea of what was, you need to be in love with the idea of what can be.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't want to make light of this in any way, but I had this image while you were talking there, Seb, of a coin with two sides, and one of them would say, "What would Shaun do?" On one side, and on the other side, it would say everybody was kung fu fighting. I just thought that would be fantastic. Now I have one last comment, and then we can get some final thoughts here. Catherine jumped in here afterwards and said, "Thank you for your insights. It's a question I get asked often in my work with folks. Reaffirms my beliefs. Love the process that Seb shared. Absolutely." Let's get some final thoughts here. I think we've kind of gone all over the place with this conversation, but this is perfect. It's a good way to have a good conversation on a Wednesday. Let's get some final thoughts. Anything still bubbling in the back of your brain, Jenny?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch back a little bit because I felt like, my first time being on the show, I don't want to take up too much time. I know we're over, but I didn't want to dismiss Catherine's question of the grief process. And for me, just to say it's a choice and then just leave it at that. Um, Grief, I think we oftentimes think I'm going to go from this really painful place, and then it's just going to be something else altogether after the fact, whatever we choose. And in losing my ex-husband a few summers ago, that process is still unraveling for me. And in the grieving process, it really is being able to engage with the pain, the love, the happiness, the appreciations, and it's the contrast, and right, it's never just this like, okay, it's going to be just really painful, because even though I've gotten to a certain place of more clarity, there are still times where it's really painful. And again, it's never just this linear process. It's both and. Like, I get to laugh at my pain in regards to like losing him. It's so many things all together at the same time. So I think just bringing light to that, so that people don't think that, oh, what's wrong with me? Why haven't I gotten over it? Or, you know, expecting this really black or white situation. And so I think in giving like a small action for people that I think is overlooked, and the choice is very simple. And I'm not saying that it's easy. It's if you ask yourself, what beauty is here that I can't see right now? Your reticular activating system will then be on that track to find the beauty that you may not be willing to see. But in just simply asking that question, you're now opening up more possibility. You're putting a little wedge between the pain of where you are and, where you're headed, so to speak. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Seb, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I've done a lot of talking, so I'll just jump on here briefly. One of the very powerful mechanisms that I like to employ when losing somebody or is, what would that person want from me? What would that person want for me? If I start being down and say I've lost a friend or I've lost somebody, and I'm going down the drain of, guaranteed, if I had this conversation with that person, they'd be slapping me around, on the one side and the other. Then first of all, it can bring laughter into your day, because you're like, what I'm being right now and what this dude is doing over there. And I mean, I think Shaun, he's still around probably until he's 100, judging by how old he is already doing the stuff he does. But if something happened to Shaun today and I thought about how he was gonna, slap me upside the face and convict me of something when we have a conversation about it, then I can inject joy in my life all of a sudden at a very dark time, which is re-injecting that person in a much lighter light and a much more powerful one. And then it brings another added benefit, which is, what can I do now to live up to what it is that he would tell me to do? And am I doing that, or am I completely, in the wrong? And so I'll bring something that, just for you guys to think about, and I mean everybody to think about, what is the benefit of having these conversations in advance? Because a lot of people refuse to do and see that. It's like, if I talk about death with my spouse or with my kid or with somebody, I'm automatically bringing it on, like it's going to somehow be bad omen. And what's bad omen? The lack of a plan. That's bad omen. Like, things are inherently going to go sideways. There's no question that that's the case. And what will you like me to do? Like, what would you want from me? What do you feel would be the best way to address your loss? And as hard and as difficult as those conversations are, they are absolutely life-saving when things are going sideways. And in a military context or in a tactical context, you write your will at 18 or 19. You already have these conversations with your peers. One of them has already told you to destroy his phone if something happens, or whatever the case is. And I'm making light of this, but the reality is, as we grow in our relationships, we very seldom have these conversations, because these conversations make us feel like we're somehow going to bring it on. Well, it is coming on. And the best way for you to know where you stand and how to have a certain compass, it's to have that conversation and say, tell me how you feel about, if something was to happen to you, what would you expect from me? What would you expect from me? And, and I think that there is incredible value in doing that. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. Food for thoughts, but incredibly powerful.
Very much so. We talked about death quite a bit in my household, and I don't mean like quite a bit. We're not we don't go into the morbid realm of it, but things die. That's the cycle of life. And I hunt, and my kids ask me about it. We've had lots of animals. We've had family members that have passed away. Like, that's part of life, and it is something that we need to discuss and engage in. And to your point, Seb, yeah, when I was 21, I wrote my first will. Like that. It happens pretty fast when you're in the military. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Sure do. So on the aspect of an event coming up in the near future for you in your life that is, less than bueno. Maybe it is a family pet that's passing away. Maybe it's a family member. That isn't the important part. The fact remains that these things are inevitable. And more often than not, and I'm not talking about the chaos of life that is called instantaneous. I'm talking about, if you're paying attention to life, you can see the indicators, you can see some signals, you can see that it's on the near horizon. And so I booked Strider's euthanization a week beforehand. And so every day I was counting down how many meals he had left in my mind every time I made a meal. And I would say to the family, and when I said it out loud to Doreen, the sentence I said was, "Man, he's only got 2 more meals left." And she kind of did this. Oh no, I hadn't thought of it that way. Now, it's not that I wanted to shock my wife. She knows, she knew. She was part of the booking process. She was fully aware. But it's sometimes coming from the right person at the right time, saying the right thing, is what clicks things into synchronicity, into the realization that this is happening. And there is a velocity to this thing that is non-adjustable. It's right on the near horizon, so you have to get right with it. And there's no head in the sand on that moment. You can't duck, dodge, and dive the reality of life. You've got to face it head on with sort of almost a sense of grace for everyone around you. I'll move on from that, and I'll say this, that Seb brought up something earlier, and it's the idea that when someone is a bit in the hurt locker, people will reach in to some degree and make sure that you're okay. And that's a good indicator of how much you've put out into life. If you've got hundreds of people that are really, really caring enough to send you a DM or send you a whatever, it's often a reflection of how much you've put out. At least that's what I've been told over the last 48 hours. That's not me kind of making things up in my own mind right now as to, I think this is how life works. I think this is how life has worked for a long time, well before we all existed. And so that's something to consider. What you put out is what you get back. And if you're getting nothing back, maybe it's time to put out. Now, I'll throw just a little waiver on that because I want to be careful. If you're struggling and no one's reaching into you, it may not be because you haven't been putting out. It may just be that you're putting out a vibe that you don't want to be contacted, that you want to hermit it up. For a while there, for a couple of years, I was putting out a vibe that just freaking leave me alone, man. I'm just doing my Miyamoto Musashi thing out here in my cave, thinking about life and not wanting to be bothered by ya all. That's how I thought for a while. It's not that I was depressed. It's not that I didn't like people. It wasn't anything that anyone can ever imagine. It was just me wanting to figure things out in, to some degree, the silence of my inner world to understand things deeper. I think we all need that from time to time. But the vibe that you put out when you're in that phase, when you're actively engaging in this Musashi-like moment, put out a vibe that helps everyone around you. And I'm not just talking about your immediate circle of friends and family. I'm talking about the world. Put out a vibe that helps the world understand that you're still in the game. You're actively in it with them, but you just need the time to figure things out. Never shut anyone down so hard that they'll stop reaching in. That's on you. But you can hang out in your cave and do your Musashi thing with the right vibe, and the right people will keep helping you along the way.
Yeah, that is the truth. And there's a little piece on that I want to add as my own final thought here is the fact that if you have to know where you're giving that energy, because if you're just giving energy to the world, it just dissipates into the world. If you are giving it to a particular community, then that community will give it back 100%. And that is where the key thing is. I think a lot of us, I know myself for a long time, I would just give outward, oh, I'm going to help that, and I'm going to help these things, do that, and do these, and it was constantly external. And when I started to struggle, there was no focus for it to come back. It was all just, out of phase kind of deal. But when I started giving specifically to a community, when I started doing veterans advocacy, or when I started doing podcasting, or when I started doing the collective, that's where that focus, when I started struggling, turned around and came back to help me. So that, I think that is part of it. Now, last couple comments we will hit on here. Kathy Hirschfeld said, well said, Jenny. She said, well said, Shaun. And she said, well said, Seb. We were all terminal the day we were born. Other than that, I think that is great. I want to say thank you guys, Jenny, Seb, Shaun, for hanging out a little bit longer, and everybody watching. I really appreciate hanging out for the extra half an hour that we've been rolling today. Just a fantastic conversation. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see you next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.